Creation's Journey to Life, Day 50, Thought as God and Origin. Watch, The Trap, The Century of the Self, and Cyborg. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that I have thought to be elevated as God within and as a decision maker as to what I will allow on earth and what I will justify on earth, without cross-referencing with the actual earth reality to see in self-honesty if my God meets the requirement of life on earth, or if my thoughts as God are causing harm to life and my neighbor in the name of my self-interest. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the origin of thought is deified without understanding the creation process of thought. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that by accepting thought as self, self as life becomes a slave of thought. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that thoughts that judge are the nature of self accepted as thought, which is the fear that thought as the illusion of self must generate to protect thought of self-righteousness. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the living flesh that is the real self has been, through generations of abuse, made into a zombie-like slave that allows all life on earth to become valueless as life. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that thoughts are created through influence and fear with great ease, and that love was created to justify thought as self without realizing that thought is the act of separation that leads to the final termination of life. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that thought is not part of a newborn child and only becomes a part of the human after extensive indoctrination to comply with the system on earth that values the tools that protect thought as the tyrant on earth. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that with thought as master, life on earth became only a commodity on earth to buy and sell. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that those that deify knowledge and thought can never be trusted to create a world that is best for all life. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that to create self-talk as positive thinking requires a deliberate denial of the physical real reality, which causes even more harm to life, as abuse of life is deliberately claimed by the thinker to be just illusion. Yet, the thinker will not go and test the physical claimed illusion for themselves to see if their thoughts are real or whether the physical world is real. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that the energy that forms thoughts comes from the physical body, and that when the body dies, thought dies, as the supply of energy required for thoughts ends. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that thought communication as telepathy is not actual thought communication. It is just the reading of symbolism and body language through trained interpretations in a predictable world system of patterns. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that brainwashing as direct thought control is impossible, as all brainwashing happens as images that are accepted into the living flesh from where it resonates into images and patterns that arise in the mind to be accepted and allowed as the self, as personality. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that mind control is impossible, as all thought first goes into the living flesh and the personality chooses which thoughts to accept that resonate from the memory in the flesh, and which memories to suppress, building the self and the worldview of the personality from these memories to present the graven image to the world as self-interest that is doomed to end in the grave, and in doing so, the living flesh Jesus showed abdicates eternal life. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that positive thinking is aggressive thinking that leads to all violence and war in the world, as the positive thinker will do anything to protect the addiction to positive feelings and the illusory self-interest that flows from positive thinking. I forgive myself that I have accepted and allowed myself to not realize that positive thinking is the origin of ignorance, as all real values and causes and consequences will be denied without any investigation, and the mind of the positive thinker will become a war zone on high alert to protect the identity of the positive illusion, even to where actual life is destroyed. and the life given to the living flesh is denied. I commit myself to show that humans have accepted thought as God, and that this acceptance has created a world of suffering where actual life is denied in favor of the illusion of thought. I commit myself to assist those willing to investigate all things to keep what is best for all life, in understanding and providing and proving to themselves how thought is actually created. I commit myself to show that all thinkers are dictators that hold life as its slave. I commit myself to show that thought is always judgment, and as you judge, you are judged, and the price paid is death. I commit myself to show that the generational transfer of thought and knowledge has elevated the illusion to where it is accepted as reality, in spite of the evidence that thought is unable to sustain and support life on Earth. I commit myself to show that all thinkers will not enter eternal life, as thought is just illusions of energy. I commit myself to show that a newborn child is forced into thought similarly to a mental rape that continues for years till the child submits to the control and ends up as an adult that defends thought even at the cost of destroying life. I commit myself to show that all life on Earth is now only a commodity to be traded, and suggests that in self-investigation, one must trade places with every being on Earth to test the values accepted on Earth, and to see that thought never values life in this way. Maybe self-honesty can be born to set the human free from the control of the positive that is the origin of all fear and hate. I commit myself to show that a thinker can never be trusted, as self-interest will always determine the final choice, and all self-interest, no matter how positively projected, always exists as its foundation and origin, which is fear. I commit myself to challenge all positive thinking to go and experience the life of the poor for a year, and to learn what positive thinking really actually allows and creates. I commit myself to show that all claims of telepathy and thought communication is just the desires of insecure, clever abusers that seek to make money or gain attention for their illusion off the insecure and gullible human that is completely lost in thought patterns of conspiracy and fear. I commit myself to show that what brainwashing practically is in this world, and to show that no one can control another's thoughts and images without the permission of the thinker, as the flesh remembers that actual freedom only exists as that which is best for all life, and only that should have permission to be part of you as a living flesh. I commit myself to show that mind control is impossible without permission from thinkers as the flesh, and that all control ends at death, when it will become clear who lives or not. I commit myself to show that Jesus understood the word as living, as life, as living flesh, but also understood that the human was not ready to realize until all is lost, and the end of life is certain. We have reached that time, and each will face a final choice, which will be proven as the living flesh, and only those as the living flesh that live what is best for all life as neighbors will enter life. I commit myself to show, as I have already showed many times, that the positive thinkers are the real aggressors and violent ones on Earth that will not stop till all life is destroyed. I commit myself to show that ignorance follows ignoring.